Mike, Mike, are you coming from
Can
the
you
dungeon?
can you hear me?
I can hear
I'm
you, my
coming from the
man.
dungeon.
Yeah, the
Okay,
Harry.
I'm hoping this works out. Thanks, bud.
No problem. So, Mike, we have talked in circles via text message, DM, phone calls, everything in between. So I figured just might as well get it going via the little live streams I've been doing and whatnot. Obviously, I am wherever I'm at, the West Coast right now. You are, you're doing your thing with your family, and I think you have the cameos going on. I essentially had to move across country for a couple months. I'm not in my thing, but the UFL
Yeah.
is in full force right now, Mike. And what are we thinking?
Oh, I'm excited for the season. I can't wait for it. It's been quite the journey to get to this point. If you had told me a year ago that we'd be sitting here with this kind of like merged USFL, XFL thing, I wouldn't have believed you. I would have thought it was maybe for something down the road, but here we are now. So, I'm very excited about the potential. I can't wait for the games. I've been craving it the last couple of weeks. I've been going back watching. I have so many USFL and XFL games from last season, like DVR. And I'm a maniac. Last week I was watching the Stars and the Generals. I went back and watched the Defenders and the Battlehawk. Defenders and the Dragons. That was a primetime affair. So I went back and watched both those. And, I'm just looking forward to the league. I'm fascinated, as you are, Pat, by the whole roster business. I'm privy to a lot of the maneuvering that goes on behind the scenes, negotiations. I know a lot of the GMs, there's a lot of great ones in this league. They've been reaching out to players, still trying to sell them on the league. There's a lot of guys, like, people don't realize, like, there's so many guys on the fringe that are on the fence about joining this league. And then sometimes what you do is you get some of those guys, the Matt Corrals, those kind of guys that do join the league and take the plunge. And then you got guys who are still on the fence. We saw guys like late last year in the XFL season, during the USFL season too, where guys like, Brandon Smith and the Michael Bandys and all these guys, like, they joined the league later on, so like Brandon Smith, kind of after being 2 years on the Dallas Cowboys practice squad, he decided, let me take a shot with the Defenders. He happened to come into a situation where they had two very well-established receivers who are kind of like above him in the pecking order, in Chris Blair and Lucky Jackson. Maybe this year it happens for him. I'm a big fan of his talent since Iowa. So he signed with the Cardinals at the end of the XFL season. He looks the part. He looks like lack of a better term, NFL receiver. Big kid, 6'2", 2 plus. He looks the part. And, he showed some flashes. He didn't get a lot of playing time and all that. So it's fascinating, the process behind the scenes when you peek behind the curtain. And, all these conversations you and I have, so many off the record things that I can't let it publicly go with. But you guys, everybody in my inner circle that covers these leagues, they're privy to a lot of the information. I'm as forthcoming as I could possibly be to you guys, and you guys are cool about it to not blow up my spot. You have discussions with the players in the league and agents and all that. A lot of times they'll give you information, but it's tough for me because a lot of people expect me to just, like, I know, for example, Josh Hammond just retired, right? Wide receiver for the DC Defenders. I know that the DC Defenders are going to announce a sign of wide receiver who's got more than 80 catches in the NFL, is a former NFL draft pick within the last few years, and they're going to announce that. So that's one of the guys that's being welcomed into that receiving. It's not going to be announced by the league officially until likely Monday, maybe Tuesday. So I know who the player is. I just can't go out front of it, but you guys will hear it.
You said this player has 80 career receptions because you came in a little gargled there. So just kind of funnel it
yes,
down.
A little over 80. Sure. A little over 80 receptions. He's a recent NFL draft pick within the last, I want to say, 5 years. So that's kind of the story there. You should hear, everyone out there should hear the signing for maybe on Monday, perhaps on Tuesday. He's already in camp. So, you guys are out there, the detectives out there might be able to find out soon enough. An IG post, who knows? But I'm aware of the player, but that's just an example of one of those situations where I can't go as much as I want to do that for Sports Illustrated and all that. I can't go public.
Well, you gotta always do what I do is whenever you find
fact that
Mike, you're coming in real broken, bud.
oh, sorry.
Yeah, no,
See
no
if I
one
can
has
try
heard.
to
Yeah,
everybody out there.
yeah. I'm gonna send you to the back, Mike. If you
See
know,
if I can
and
straighten this out.
yeah, I'm gonna send you to the
Go
back
for
real
it.
quick. Yeah. So obviously, Mike has been, dealing with audio. If you can be hearing what he's got to say, it's pretty on point on point content. I mean, big news from uh, the UFL this week. Obviously, Josh Hammond's retiring. Um, Not only Josh Hammond retired, but also Alonzo Moore. Something I brought up about Alonzo Moore was that he had he was the first player in like the modern spring league era to break over 1,000 yards and whatnot. You had him retire, so he joins that real long list of like Liam Ryan, Bruno Reagan, who played in 3 versions of these leagues. Brian Folkritz retired, full-time coach now at Wingate Division II program down North Carolina. Max Borghi, obviously, and then there's a bunch of others, and I think we're going to continue to see that. I'm going to bring back Mike right now, see how that works out for us, and let's see what we got going on. All right, Mike, round 2.
This sucks. I hope this works. Pat. I'm so sorry. Yeah,
no,
kind of like I don't know
good,
if you
man.
can hear me. All right, yeah, but yeah, that's like kind of like you mentioned at the offset of the top about how we. It's kind of like I kind of threw that out there. Probably shouldn't have, but just like stuff that we kind of share off the air. So I appreciate you having me on here. And the 75, just like any situation in pro football, it's fluid. Guys get injured, guys don't show up for camp. Guys get released, maybe rub their coaches or new coaches the wrong way. So we'll see some new additions. That's not locked in stone.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple people there. I don't understand where this Ja'Cour Pearson thing came from. Like, I am very confused. I talked to members of the team, from coaches to players, and they're very confused. But you were saying you were getting where is this rumor coming from about Ja'Cour Pearson?
Yeah, maybe it's on me for not paying attention to all the different community posts and the Reddits and the Discord. Yeah. But up until yesterday, I didn't know that people were monitoring. Can you hear me, Pat?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I didn't know if people. Yeah, I didn't know if people were. I didn't know that people thought that Ja'Cour Pearson was not signed or was not showing up. I know that he had some recent posts about sponsorships and not being able to wear gloves he wants and that kind of stuff. So maybe that led into it. But we have people within this community that monitor all the UFL PR posts and then went back to last year looking for Ja'Cour Pearson's name and assumed, because they hadn't seen it, as someone who signed a letter of intent, that he was somehow not showing up. So I had people reaching out to me asking me, is Ja'Cour Pearson on the roster? And, and I said yes. And then, of course, I reached out to the team just to make sure, because of the whole sponsorship controversy. And so it was just funny to me that there were people that actually assumed that he was not in. Now, you never know what happens during camp. There are players that leave camp or upset, et cetera, maybe have a falling out with their coaches. But that's how things can grow. There are people out there that went back and went through all the PR listings and said, why don't I see Pearson's name? One thing you got to remember is, guys can't get drafted unless they sign a letter of intent for the league. That's why, or being announced as protected. So that was kind of the story there. That's why, so Ja'Cour was drafted there. I mean, could it have been possible? I did the research because so many people reached out to me just to make sure. I did the digging just to make sure. And then it's, I checked with the team, and then there he is. He's part of the team, and he's in camp, smiling, happy to be a part of it. And he should be, because he has a chance in that offense he had a breakout season last year, but to really kind of fortify his value as a receiver in this league. And maybe, he's one of the guys that didn't get the NFL shot for whatever reason. A lot of different theories out there. I won't get into them. But in that offense with that quarterback, there's a chance for him to have a really big year.
Yeah, I mean that receiving core is a gluttony of riches right now, and I mean, they going. I know we want to talk coaching change. I'm sure we'll talk it about, but they're going in there with a new room with Phil McGeehan in there, I believe, and then you have obviously Ricky Prohl with his son, kind of moving on to the next phase in their life. So honestly, like I could probably be the wide receivers coach there, and it'd be like we'd still have a couple guys make all league. I mean, you can't even describe the depth chart, because they're all so different and different skill sets, and it's really coming down to whatever. If you're a fan of it, like, oh, Hakeem Butler's number one, and it's like maybe if they're trying to stretch the field and get one-on-ones, but then you got Marcel Aitman, who's healthy now, and obviously Shep, great, number two, number three type guy, and then Jakor, and then Blake Jackson there, and then we're not even talking about Steven Mitchell and Jamarcus Bradley's an NFL caliber receiver, 6'4".
Yes.
They were very high on him. A little bit disappointed that he went to the NFL last year, but he's back. And I mean, I know I'm missing someone else. I think James Bostic. Right. Yeah, but how many guys did I just list that are all?
That's a lot. I mean, and this was the case last year. You covered the team last year, obviously, and we saw every week it was Jennings, it was Mitchell, it was Butler, it was Aitman, and Shepard, who I'm a huge fan of. Have been for quite some time. To me, there are a lot of guys in this league that, to me, I don't care if they on an NFL roster now, they haven't been able to make it or stick. There are several guys in this league that I'm for sure 100% believe are NFL players. And it's just, circumstance for whatever reason, politics, injuries, depth, just not finding the right fit. Shepard's one of those guys. He's like a complete player to me. So you listed off all those guys, and there's a lot of different types of receivers in that group. And AJ's comfortable in that system. He has freedom in it. And that's lethal combination. When you have guys that are coming back for a second year, Pearson has to study the playbook, commit himself. He's very talented, very fast. He can bring an added dimension that the team doesn't really have underneath and down the field. But there's a lot of talent on that Battlehawks offense. They're going to give other teams problems, and they did last year. Obviously, AJ had a tremendous year. It's the best year of his pro career. He's been in the NFL. He's had moments, but he's never had that kind of opportunity to lead a football team from start to finish. And I know he missed a game, injury and what have you, but that was as good as it gets. He got a legitimate opportunity and he made the most of it, and he's surrounded by very good talent.
Yeah, I mean, he's a Vontaze Burfict penalty away from being from possibly saving Marvin Lewis's career, to be honest with you. I think that was
truth. Yeah,
I mean, Vontaze Burfict doesn't hit AB like that, then we're talking about probably AJ McCarron on the Nick Foles arc, maybe not a Super Bowl, but those 4-year, $70 million contracts, which AJ's made plenty of money. So I think he's okay. But
whenever I think of Vontaze Burfict, I think of the original XFL back in 2001, which I covered, the New York, New Jersey Hitmen. Yes. I always think he would have been an ideal XFL because, that league was crazy. You're allowed to basically hit everybody helmet to helmet. So he honestly would have fit in with that character. But anyhow, yes, it's going to be fun to watch. It's hard not to put, everybody's going to be doing rankings. I'll be doing them myself too. I'm waiting for a last few second roster additions. We saw it towards the end of the run. AJ committed, Luis Perez committed, Jordan Teamo committed. But everyone's going to, anybody of sound mind is going to put the Battlehawks in that top half. How you want to put them 2, 3, 4, whatever. 1. I think anyone looking at that roster, and they bolstered their defense significantly. So yes. Pass rush, there's still question marks. I'm not saying there isn't. We'll see back end linebacker who steps up, that kind of deal. But I'm always bad with names. Talamoa Penn.
Yeah, big P. We call him big. Mike, you.
That's what so
You're breaking up again, Mike. I'm gonna put you into the back and maybe fix it once more.
so
So as Mike kind of gets through it, basically coming down to that Battlehawks linebacking core, that front seven is what I feel is going to be obviously the biggest issue and whatnot. Peter Tomapeno, obviously defensive player of the year, but who's going to be the guy who's going to have that lateral quickness, who's going to be pushing on through all this and whatnot is something I'm really, really curious about. Johnny Buchanan right there in that linebacking core, man, that's the one that I'm really pumped about and whatnot. Only fear about him is like what's he got going on, like his lateral quickness. He's a hulking guy. However, might not be the most athletic and whatnot, but we'll see. He'll probably prove me wrong. You know what I mean? So then try to bring Mike back real quick. All right, Mike. How we doing?
all right, we'll see how this goes. I'm sorry, brother. It sucks. Nothing worse than technical difficulties. So
it's we're going through the wave. You come through and then you say things, you start breaking up, and then I push through and kind of clean up whatever I have to say. So it's all good though, man.
thanks, Pat. Thank
you. The last part what I was saying is I was talking about there. And I've talked about this to anyone who's got to listen. And, the thing with the Battlehawks for me, as far as like what their weakness is I just feel like on defense, they have a lot of good players, but no one's great. And I think that's a little offensive if, but like this year, the offseason upgrade with PETA and then Austin Fayalu, Antoine Jackson, like he's more of a three technique, like 3-4 defensive end, in my opinion. Like those are all the Abram Smith effect, essentially, is what we've been calling it, right?
Yeah, for sure. And that's that's what Battlehawks. It's funny because like it's so cool about this league. What the Battlehawks and Defenders have built up a nice little rivalry that's legitimate between the fan bases and the two teams. There's no love lost there. We saw them fighting on the field last year. And that's basically what happens in the NFL with teams. You try to pick up players to help you against your rivals. DC's ground attack was phenomenal last year. Abram Smith effect, as you say, and so they need a closer in the pass rush. They need a guy like PETA. And the back end has to hold up, but they got to be able to stop the run. And they need somebody a closer late in games. They want to get teams eventually into third and long and force them to pass, where they're not running on you. So the Battlehawks, they're countering. They have to get ready. The DC, that's with all due respect, and I know the Arlington Renegades are going to have a chip on their shoulder like they did during the playoffs. They're going to be a lot of teams, a lot of people out there going to rank them 5th to 8th. In the rankings this season, they're going to be overlooked, understandably so. But right now it's Battlehawks and Defenders, at least on paper, you would assume. We'll see what happens with the Brahmas, with Wade Phillips and that group. But the line in the sand drawn between St. Louis and DC, who's got the better fan base, who's got better fans, and how they match up. And, they started it in 2020. We saw it last year, and it's extended to this year. It's going to be quite the matchup watching those two teams go at it.
Well, something that gets lost in this Josh Hammond retirement is, you do have the Brandon Smith opportunity, but you're essentially down to your 4th-string wide receiver because Chris Blair's not coming back and Lucky Jackson's not coming back. So it's like, I think they've done a good job adding these pieces. Like, but this is not like as this isn't under the
you're
radar
right,
thing. This is
that's
the
biggest
deal.
question. Yeah, that's the biggest question mark to me with DC. Like who's going to step up? Like I think some people anyway, underrate how good Blair and Jackson were last year. They were like one of
the problem is, and Mike, I don't know if you can hear me on this. The problem is like so many.
I can hear you, Pat.
Okay, so you're kind of becoming a little wobble, but the problem is a lot of people will see the stats and be like, oh, okay, Ja'Cour Pearson had 670 receiving yards, and then this guy had 500, and then the next guy has like 2 or 300. One, it's a 10-game season, and then two, like they cannibalize each other and whatnot. Because Lucky and Blair, I think, had 4 to 500 each. These guys both appeared in NFL games last year. Like they made it through the season. They got rosters. They have legitimate shots to compete in for 2020. Whatchamacallit, for their 2024 53 man. And if not, they're still going to be a practice squad guy making about $250,000. So, like, I personally feel like that's not getting talked about enough. And then there's continuity and whatnot. Like, it's who else is down there? Jazz Ferguson. That doesn't really get me that too like excited. He was an XFL renegade, but now he comes back. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, Jazz fits their like running attack. He's a very good blocker and all that big guy. But you're right, Pat. With Blair and Jackson, like I said, Lucky and Chris Blair, they were two of the most dynamic wide receivers in spring pro football last year. They delivered so many big plays. You look at the yards per catch. They developed a tremendous chemistry with Jordan Te'amu. They fit the offense. The plays were designed, that RPO stuff was designed to have simple routes, simple reads for Jordan, and, catch and run and big plays down the field with those guys. And you got guys like Hightower, Preston Williams. These guys have somewhat of an NFL pedigree. Hightower being a recent draft pick with the Eagles. He spent time in the NFL. Same thing with Preston Williams. We'll see who emerges out of that lot, right? We'll find out about you. You guys will find out about the person they've just added. But yes, that is the biggest question mark with DC, is whether or not they had high-level production from their receiver position, even though everybody thought of them as a run-first team.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens with Puka Williams. He's someone that kind of meandered along last year, collecting paychecks and whatnot. So hopefully he's able to kind of get it together with a full year of putting a lot of BS behind him. I mean, DC loses 2 offensive linemen. I know Bruno Reagan was kind of signed off the couch, for lack of a better term, but he's still a guy with starting experience. He retires. Liam Ryan retires. You lose your 3 top receivers from last year. You add some good pieces and whatnot, but I mean, it's just, there's so much. I think we're going to see more retirements coming right now. I think guys are going down there, and I always said you could do everything for a day. It's that day 2 of showing back up when you're like, man, screw this. I'm not doing this.
No, it's the truth. And, you see that with a lot of these guys. They're like, they figure, hey, let me give it a go. And one last shot. And then they say, you know what, this is not for me. And so there are some veterans that maybe don't like the new setup and all that kind of stuff. We kind of had AJ McCarron out there talking about that publicly. But yeah, that's why, you've had some great shows on, and Nicholas Thorne is one of the guys in this space that I really respect. He's doing tremendous work out there. But when you talk about the 75 being locked in, there's no such thing as locked in, obviously, with the rosters. And so I mean, there's no rule that says you can't sign another player. I mean, until you're 75, that's it.
Yeah, well, I think that's more of an empty threat to like quarterback number 3 versus like, I mean, realistically, AJ could show up on March 27th and probably still go. You know what I mean? Maybe Te'amu's probably at that point. Perez is probably at that point as well. So I know Holton Ahlers thinks that he's the guy there, but I don't know. I don't see it.
That's the ego too, because like a lot, and that's good to have an ego. It's good to have a healthy ego when you're a competitor. But there's a lot of like those kind of guys who they assume, hey, I was just in an NFL team. I'm a really good player. Who's this Luis Perez guy? Who's this Lindsey Scott? I'm just gonna come in and waltz in and take over. And there's like a reality check for a lot of those guys. Like there's gonna be guys in a month from now, Pat, that are cut from these teams that are gonna be like, how the hell did I get cut by a UFL team?
Yeah, I can't wait, man, because like screw those guys. Like I'll be straight up about it. Like I don't know Holton Ahlers. I've never met Holton Ahlers, but all it takes is a Wikipedia search on a person to just be like, oh, okay, this guy has done something with his life. I would think it'd be awesome. I think he's gonna get cut. I think he's gonna get. I've had Arlington players be like, "Screw this guy already."
Yeah, and yeah, he already. Yeah. You don't do that. Like we saw like the veteran players in these leagues like come out and go, who the hell is this kid? Why is he saying that? And they
Yeah.
brought Plitt back in, and Plitt knows the system and knows that team. So that doesn't really bode well for Holton. Yeah, there's going to be quite a few of those guys. Like, there's a lot of people that assume. See, that's the thing with these UFL rosters. We got a lot of returning coaches and schemes and players, and you can't just waltz in off the street and say, I hate to bring up this guy because I'm a fan favorite, but you can't just assume I'm Ocho Cinco, I'm going to make it. So I'll play these DBs, I'll run circles around them. That's just not how it works. So I think you got to be humble, and you can't come in doing that. So you rub people the wrong way if you're out there saying I'm already QB1 when the guy you're talking about replacing has earned the respect in these leagues and just won a damn championship. They're the reason. No disrespect to the rest of the Arlington players, they all did a very good job. But Luis Perez is the reason they won the whole thing last year. I mean, he got hot at the right time. He embraced he embraced the system, joined them late, and they won because of him. Simple as that, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and I don't think there's anyone in Arlington who would disagree with you with that. I mean, sometimes, like you said, you just get hot at the right time. The stars align. The werewolves come out, and to me, the way like this Ahlers guy.
And maybe he goes out there and he proves everybody wrong and he lights it up. Anything's possible, but that's not the right. I don't see it completely, but we'll see what happens. But that mindset, there's going to be a lot of guys. We're going to see whatever it is, 200 players cut, 25 per team at the end of the road, barring the cuts that we see in the next week or so. Because there's going to be some guys that out of shape, don't have the right mindset. That rub their coaches the wrong way or say this is not for me, and they leave camp. So we get those. We get that in NFL camp. So we'll get that in the UFL too.
Yeah, I mean, another guy who retired, and I talked about it briefly when you were in the back, was Alonzo Moore. I'm a big fan of Alonzo Moore. I don't know him personally, but if Mike Riley keeps you around, then you're probably a half decent guy, in my opinion. So wanted to shout that out.
Awesome. And it's cool. Like, one of the great things about this league, I mean, we talk about like all the players that get opportunities to get into the NFL. We saw like almost 120 players that play in the USFL and XFL assign NFL contracts, right? So that was cool. But one of the cool things about these leagues is like this is giving guys the opportunity to continue their pro career, to play 3 or 4 or 5 more years. There's some guys that for whatever reason are going to be career spring league guys. And there's nothing wrong with that. We don't know, Jordan Teamo, Luis Perez, they can play, if God willing, this league lasts, they can play in this league 5-6 years, even if that NFL window closes on them. Darius Victor, there's no, so there's a lot. And Alonzo Moore, the connection with Riley helps, but hardworking player. Riley brings him around with him. He obviously earned his trust and respect. And I don't know his exact age. I'm assuming he's 31, 32, maybe a little bit older than that.
Yeah, he's around that age, yeah.
Yeah, so I would, at that time, that's retirement time for pro football players. And, he may have reached the point where, it's time to move on to the next phase. You hit a wall, as an athlete when you start getting up there in age and you figure, this is it for me. So, yeah, kudos to him. Very good player. A lot of respect for him, covering the Generals and covering his career. So, you'll have a few of those guys that'll trickle out. You'll see those names that retire in camp.
And obviously, he wasn't picked through the dispersal draft and whatnot. I know. So you kind of get to that point where you're just like, yeah, man, like this ain't for me anymore, type thing. I'm like, am I really trying to chase this NFL dream? And then, was it a $5,000 pay cut or $1,000 raise or whatever it is? It just gets to the point where I can see a lot of these guys just being like, "I'm good, man. Like, it's fun."
And a lot of these guys have outside interests, and they have other things with family members. I saw some people worried about Sal Cannella. It's funny, like in this space, we don't get enough great coverage from the mainstream media. That it comes down to like fans like looking at Instagrams and IG stories to go, hey, that looks like Sal Cannella breaking, So I mean, that's kind of like that's what it's come down to, and it's awesome that we have fans that do that, right? Yeah. But Sal Cannella has his own interests with fashion line and all that kind of stuff off the field, so you never know if guys like that will go, you know what, I'll just hold out for the NFL and do all that. You got those guys on the fringe, on the fence, like the Alonzo Moores. And then you got guys who are in camp right now that might not make the teams that are veterans that might say, you know what, that's it for me. I tried, I'm done. So we'll see how that goes.
And that's another thing with Canelo too, is like I personally feel that for him to like he could kind of build his brand through the XFL and whatnot and like tap another niche market, because over the last 2 years we've heard nothing about his clothing brand. Like really, I don't think anything was on the XFL show. I don't think anything was on the USFL show. um what you call it, we got a comment here. We've been slow in the comments, man. but
Thanks,
but
Sean.
yeah, make sure to like and subscribe, John. But like I would like to see him kind of like push that a little bit, like build his brand, because I don't think Sal Cannella is an NFL tight end, anymore. I think he's kind of in that window. So for him, in the business mind that I have, depending on the day, is I go to the XFL, USFL, UFL. They do all this cool stuff with destroying and whatnot. From there, I'm able to build my brand and then add an extra 1.5 mil of revenue, because now I have 700,000 people watching me every Sunday. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's how that
yeah, and
works.
I don't know if
That's
I don't know if the league's going to be receptive to that. I do recall it may have been just one instance on ESPN during last year where they mentioned Canala's, fashion line, dreams, and all that kind of stuff. Maybe it was in passing; it wasn't heavily, right?
yeah.
So, and I do know like a lot of these players would love to, and maybe this was sold to them, brand themselves, and the league would hype them up as individuals. And I wish the league would do a little more of that with these guys. I understand. We got Moose, Daryl Johnson as the head of football operations, and the USFL had very strict rules when it comes to certain things with gear and all that. So I get it. You want league mandated stuff, whoever the sponsors are, you want to honor them. You don't want to mess around and all that. But it would be nice if the players get a little more shine, either, through online, through social media, through whatever shows this league decides to do behind the scenes, where these guys get the chance to put their name out there and put their brand out there, and you get a better opportunity. I know they tried. We got United by Football was a very cool show. Player 54 was fun to watch. I checked out every one of them, but it was a little bit more of that for these players there for business wise. And Canelo's a good talent. He's a good talent, obviously. But that window closes for you in the NFL fast. Once you start, you're less frequently getting workouts and opportunities. That hundreds of players in the NFL every year. It's washing out the old guard. And the old guard, unfortunately, for a lot of players, is you're 25, 26, 27. You become the old guard pretty fast. You're one of those fringe guys who's hanging on. So we'll see what happens with that. But hopefully, guys like Canelo get a little bit more shine for what they're doing off the field too, and that kind of helps their brand. And I'm sure Perez is happy to have him there, because there's some question marks about Renegades receiving core, who's going to emerge, who's going to step up. So having a who already has a connection with Luis is helpful for Wellington's offense.
Well, you talk about the old guard, and this is something I talked to John Vogel about this a lot. Is I felt like last year there was a QB bubble getting ready to pop. Just QBs were getting older and older and older, and I made a list, and I had Josh Johnson, Ryan Griffin, Matt Ryan, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Chad Henne, Colt McCoy, Nick Foles, Chase Daniel, Brian Hoyer, Mike Glennon, Joe Flacco, and the other three quarterbacks to retire were under 30 years old or about 30 years old from the 2022 season. It was Garrett Gilbert, Kyle Lauletta, and Davis Webb. They all kind of retired. Davis Webb going into coaching, Kyle Lauletta, USFL. But, this bubble has kind of regulated a little bit, because, Ryan Griffin technically retired. He's going into coaching. Teddy Bridgewater, David Blau, both going into coaching. So point of all those names and whatnot is everyone's QB room is pretty young right now. So like with the UFL cutting, like USFL cutting down, like the old, like there's not going to be much time for BS, because, for instance, if Holton Ahlers can't beat out a Sam Ellinger, like he's gonna, there's not gonna be like another year for this guy to retire. They're gonna get that UDFA from the next level, and unfortunately, it's only 24 spots right now with quarterback play, man. And I'm just like, oh my god, like it's especially at that position where you get down to your Tommy DeVitos, don't look too hot, which it did for a little bit. But.
No, you know, that's the thing, Pat. Like a lot of people within these leagues, and some people who watch these leagues and follow these leagues would prefer that they stay away from veterans, right? There's a pocket of people, and don't get me wrong, there's a pocket of people, don't get me wrong, out there that know. Like I know for a fact, if this league had Cam Newton and Colin Kaepernick, they would they'd have better ratings and more mainstream attention. But from a football landscape, the ecosystem, all that, obviously those guys want a lot of money. They got pride. They don't want to play in these leagues, right? But those guys would be draws. People would be interested. They'd pay attention. But a lot of personnel people within the league, they rather have young players who develop. We saw with Alex Magoo, like in Joe Klatt, to his credit, every single broadcast was talking about how Magoo had rededicated himself to nutritioning, to the classroom and all that. He took a massive leap. He showed some signs in that first year in the USFL, but he took a massive leap as a professional in the USFL last year. And you could see that, and not just the way he looked, obviously, but how he conducted himself, how he commanded the huddle, how he commanded the quarterback room, all that. And so young guys can grow if they're willing to commit as professionals. They can grow in these leagues. And older guys, the Cam Newtons, the Colin Kaepernick, some of the names you mentioned, let's say Mike Glennon, right? If you were like Mike Glennon wanted to show up on a UFL roster, yeah, that would be great for the room. He brings veteran experience and all that. But if he's playing over a younger guy like a Lindsey Scott or what have you, that makes it tough, So I think a lot of personnel people would rather bet on the upside than the guy who's on the downside on the back end of their career, even if there is value in having a veteran in your room that can teach the younger guys the ropes on how to be a pro.
I mean, we saw it with Matt McGloin, I think, personally. We saw it with Landry Jones, Aaron Murray. I guess you could throw it like when Aaron Murray was on the Express, I was all in. I was very excited about it. I was like, I didn't think Aaron Murray was a NFL QB, but in minor league baseball, they say the term 4A when they're better than AAA. I thought that was like going to be awesome. And all three of those guys were terrible. And then when I saw Josh Johnson back in, I was like, man, this guy who couldn't do anything when he was with the Redskins, and when Alex Smith got hurt, I was like, and then he's amazing. I did like PJ Walker when they signed him, though. I didn't think he'd beat out Connor Cook. Just because of Connor Cook, having the NFL experience. But if Oliver Luck was all in, I was all in. But and
PJ wasn't like a 30-plus-year-old guy. At least with PJ, he was still kind of a recent young player.
Yeah, no, he just who needed like.
I get what you're saying, though, Pat. I totally get what you're saying.
But you could argue Connor Cook also needed the league, and then. It worked out for one of them.
What was funny, Pat, is I mentioned Joel Klatt. That's why you can't assume things, right? Because when the XFL was coming out in 2020, Joel Klatt was in the Fox commercials hyping up Connor Cook. And if anybody could go out there and look at them, Connor Cook was one of the selling points of the XFL in 2020. Yeah. And we know how that all worked out. PJ Walker ended up being the man in Houston, and it didn't work out for Cook. So.
Yeah, I don't. It's funny with these leagues. So often we get a taste of every quarterback on their depth chart. I don't even remember who was the Houston Roughnecks third string. I think it was Garrett Fugate or something like that from Central Missouri.
Yes,
I think it was
exactly what it was. Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. That's exactly. I'd have to go back and look at because I have like spreadsheets and all that, so I'm probably forgetting someone offhand at the moment. But yes, I believe you're correct on that. But Garrett Fugate, he might have been with the Guardians as well. Boy,
I think
pretty crazy.
I think
he had a couple quarterbacks that were like on the fringe.
Well, it was Marquise
so we got a couple quarterbacks that ended up being on different teams.
Yeah. I mean.
So anyhow, but I know what you're saying. Like it's easy to forget. It's easy to forget some of those guys. As time goes on, when you're following the league, you know exactly who everybody is. But as time goes on, you forget the guys who never saw the field at all. That's kind of the story there. But
you know who you don't forget? CJ Collins, coaching at Mid-American Nazarene. Yeah.
Well, it's a powerhouse.
It actually is a powerhouse, but pro quarterback.
It is.
CJ
I know.
Collins.
It is a. It
Yeah.
is a powerhouse. It is. It is.
National champions.
It
And
is.
like it's
Yeah, that's cool.
built,
That's cool. Hey, national champs. That's right.
yeah, built by built by friend of the show, Jed Stugart, who's at Lindenwood right now. But yeah, no, I coached
Awesome.
against CJ and I saw him and I was like, I've like seen that because he kind of looks like Josh McCown and Ivan Drago a little bit. CJ
Oh, that's
Collins.
funny. It's a good
Yeah, if you
combination. Very cool.
yeah,
Very cool hair.
yeah, no, you got good hair, and I'm saying that, but yeah, I saw him and I was like, I've seen this guy before, and I looked it up. I was like, oh yeah, this guy played on like Defenders or some nonsense like that. Mike, another another stat that I had on my spreadsheet was I always like to tell people this is that the AAF was the best year for quarterback transition because you had Josh Woodrum, Logan Woodside, Garrett Gilbert, John Wolford, Matt Sims, Luis Perez, and the Woodrum. Yeah, it was about 7 of those guys all signing NFL contracts.
Yeah, and overall for sure. And you see guys that are still around, the Wolfords and the Woodsides and all that. Obviously, when you do like a starts, combination of starts from a Heineke Walker thing, it's a little bit of a different stat. But yeah, you're right though. Overall, yeah, for sure. And I think both those leagues, that's a difficult spot to hit on. It's not easy to find the right guys. I think this current league has a shot, if they do it right, if they scout guys and they get guys to, jump in a league. We got guys who I think are quality quarterbacks that I think the window's closed on Perez. I think the window's closed, even though as young as Teamo is, I think the window's closed, unfortunately, even though I think he's worthy of being on an NFL roster as a backup in my mind. He's got the size, the weight, he's got mobility, all that. He's good person, high character. So, but sometimes those J.Mar Smith, right? Another player I like who I think can play in the NFL as a backup. But that window closes on you fast. So some of these guys are going to be career spring league guys. So hopefully we get to the point where one day these types of leagues produce. There's no disrespect to PJ Walker and Tyler Heineke. They're going on whatever year 5. They've made plenty of money. They've had some shining moments on the field. It's awesome for them. But hopefully this league gets to the point where one day it produces the next Kurt Warner or, where that will really like stand out, because I think in order for these leagues to like gain the respect of a lot of mainstream fans, they need to, we've had a lot of rosterable guys, a lot of talented guys in the league. They're in the league now, right? They're on NFL rosters now. They play in the USFL, XFL, etc. I think at some point they need to produce a massive superstar. And hopefully, because that will, I think, turn heads for the league. And I think at some point there's going to be a young quarterback that comes through the UFL now and becomes a star and then moves on to the NFL and gets his opportunity after being dismissed when he joins an NFL roster and then becoming a superstar in that league. I think that kind of almost needs to happen. We've seen that. Kavontae Turpin, big-time player. Brandon Aubrey. But I'm thinking also as far as skill position, quarterback, that kind of thing. Guy who's like, all pro, because that I think that will, I know for us, we're already bought in, we're sold on it, but I'm always looking at the big picture for these leagues to prove themselves and for these leagues to get more notoriety. And I think they need to hit on a couple of superstars. A quarterback position would be huge because then everybody would endorse these leagues if they started producing, let's say Lindsey Scott or somebody like that becomes a star in the NFL. I think that would be huge.
Would you consider what Tommy Maddox did in the early 2000s as?
Of course.
Would that reach your high watermark of like? Look,
that was what I consider that is that helped. That helped. Yes. To answer your question, Pat, yes. When Maddox, it was also because one of the things I like about these leagues too is the redemption aspect. I like reclamation projects. I like guys who redeem themselves. Maddox was in a tough spot, got drafted to replace John Elway, one of the greatest, most talented quarterbacks in the history of football. And then he washed out. And then Maddox did a great job in the XFL in 2001. And then he ends up with the Steelers, wins comeback player of the year, gets the team to the playoffs. I think that's an awesome story. So he's one of the high water guys for this, where you can like redeem yourself. You can come to a league like this and redeem yourself. I'm thinking more along the lines, because like I remember in NFL Europe, Kurt Warner, Jake Delhomme. I'm missing a lot of people, but those guys stand out to me, like the guys who actually went into NFL Europe and John Kitna, they went and they developed and then they ended up having good, productive NFL careers. I'm thinking along the lines of a superstar. I'm waiting for that moment. I think it's like a huge moment, would be a huge moment for the league if a superstar quarterback came out of these leagues and made it in the NFL. I know fans of these leagues don't want to lose that player, but they want to retain all these players and all that stuff and remain a battle defender, what have you. But it would be great to see that happen.
You got to start paying, and I talked to Luke Miller about this, months ago. I believe it was him, but it came up with Magoo, and I was like, well, this is what it takes to have, this is what Alex Magoo is going to make on a practice squad. If you want him to stay, have the city pay him to stay. Like, these guys all have business off kilter. It just have them write an LLC real quick, and just the city of Birmingham pays them to play for football for this team. Is that illegal? I don't think it is. Like, that's really what it's coming down to. Like,
yeah, what? Yeah, I think the long-term idea for these guys, because I know the USFL has been trying to do this for years. The new USFL, the modern era USFL, has been trying to rope in team owners. That's the ultimate goal here. If you ever get to that point where you got that going for you, you can up salaries. And you can do that down the line. There are a few quarterbacks out there. I got to be careful not to name names here, but I know a couple of quarterbacks that are on NFL rosters that are on the fence that have been in talk with UFL teams. And so far, they've turned the league down. So for all the guys we hear about that have signed on with the UFL, and it's awesome, there are a ton of guys that turn these GMs down. Like, every one of these guys, like, I'm just going to throw out a few names. You guys can do guessing and all that kind of stuff you want. But Kellen Mond in San Antonio would be interesting. He's a San Antonio native, played at Texas A&M. A guy like him, he's with the Colts this past year, practice squad, all that. He's currently not on a futures deal unless I missed something. A guy like him is, and it's very hard for him. He's going to wait out that whole NFL thing. Like, he's going to wait for the NFL thing. But a guy like him to get an opportunity to start and lead and improve and progress and develop as a passer, it's going to be difficult for him in the NFL. He's going to be on that fringe 3 or 4. He's going to need heaven and earth to be moved. The quarterbacks to get hurt in front of him, some freakish opportunity. And he's a recent draft pick. He's 2021. He's not like, like a 2016 pick. So some of those guys are just going to wait it out. They're waiting for their NFL opportunity. But I got to tell you, guys like that could benefit. Josh Rosen, the narrative with him forever is going to be that he's one of the biggest busts in the history of the NFL. And his big mouth got him in trouble because he said he was going to make the entire league regret not taking him. And I liked him as a player in college. He wasn't my preferred quarterback in that draft, but that's neither here nor there. He should have considered, and I wrote an extensive article about it, how he should have considered playing in the USFL or XFL, but it was at the time geared towards the USFL. Guys like that, they're fine with their bank account. They're fine with it. They don't care about the narrative. And then he never got a chance to redeem himself. Rosen is out of the NFL mix. Now, maybe he gets an opportunity and gets on an offseason roster, but he wasn't on one last year. So that door to me, window for him, looks like it's closed. And so, some guys don't want to try. They don't want, and they show you who they are. At the end of the day, people show you who they are, who they really are, and whether you're dedicated or not, whether you're committed to football. And Rosen has kind of shown why he's a bust.
Yeah, I mean, all-around hustle, asking preseason QBs, FCS QBs is what the USFL or UFL should target. I think they should target, at this point, whatever makes – I don't think the development aspect is the route to go right now. I think it's building fan base. Not that you need star power or anything, but, like, I need to put a good product on the field, and whether that's with AJ McCarron or whoever the third string QB from USC is, whatever that means, that's what you have to really go with that.
There's something to be said. Yeah. There's something like AJ McCarron, like Emory Hunt. I respect Emory Hunt. Emory Hunt was very anti AJ McCarron in the XFL last year. He was very open. And I get it though. I get the argument. There's a lot of people out there that don't want veterans to be in these leagues. They just want to see young guys play, right? So it's that fine line of developing a player who's raw and having quality of play at that position. You're going to get, like Lindsey Scott could get an opportunity this year. It might be hard for him. He could get an opportunity. Who's to say Lindsey doesn't struggle? Lindsey doesn't get on the field and struggle. So, and that's no knock on him. He might, but that's kind of the way it goes. So it's that fine line. If this league was interested, maybe more Vince McMahon-ish, and was willing to spend money, they would legitimately go out and try to sign Cam Newton or Colin Kaepernick to the league and try to get ratings that way, just to get people to pay attention to the league.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think you got to put the butts in the seats. Whether and while the name factor is important and whatnot, we saw that already when they had big names, air quote, and it just didn't work out. And then that's how PJ Walker got his opportunity. I mean, Mike G asking who's the favorite to win the job in Houston. I'm going with Reed Sinnett, my man. I am big.
I'm with you, Pat. I'm with you.
That's a guy. But okay, so we talk about opportunity. We talk about all these things. Reed Sinnett's a 4-year NFL vet with multiple, probably over about $2 million of income from NFL teams. Do we not care about Reed Sinnett, who might be 26, 27, but has never gotten a shot? Like, what's the temperature check?
And that's the thing, too. And it's a good point, Pat. And that's the thing, too, with the quarterback position. That's one of the few positions in football where you can get better over time and where age is not that much of a factor. If you're talking about a running back at the age of 26, 27, you go, oh, boy, end of the road, buddy. 26 is not a death knell for a player like a Reed Sinnett. Reed Sinnett could get playing time, be a star with the Roughnecks, and he can get an opportunity to stick on an NFL roster. Whether or not he'd ever get an opportunity to start, that he needs a lot of things to happen around him for that. But I like Reed Sinnett. I think he's worth. I'm cool with that type of player too. I'm cool with any players getting opportunities, but I'm cool with that scenario of a guy who's 24, 25, 26, who's been on NFL rosters right on the fringe. He's good enough to be considered by NFL teams to be on their roster or be on their practice squad. Just hasn't gotten the opportunity to break through that glass ceiling and get on the field and play. So this is a big year for Reed Sinnett. And, the thing is with these depth charts too at quarterback, I've seen this in every league that I've covered. Write these things down in pencil, not just because of injuries and performance, but just because you see week one starters, boy, that really changes as the season goes along. There might be some guys who just don't hold up or don't play well or earn their demotion. So maybe Reed Sinnett is one of those guys that doesn't perform up to potential and he gets yanked, or the Roughnecks are looking for a change of pace there. Who knows? But I like him as a player. I think he's talented and I think he's ready. I like that team. The thing I like about Johnson is he obviously, it goes without saying, he's a tremendous wide receiver coach. So, and they have good receivers there with the Roughnecks, and I trust his judgment and scouting, and I trust his ability to coach up those players. I like a lot of those guys. I like Isaiah Henry, Justin Halls. So I'm a big fan of those guys. So I think Reed Sinnett has a chance because the Brahmas, he did a good job with the Brahmas, all things considered. But the Brahmas were a mess last year, and a lot of that had to do with a lot of injuries they had up front on the offensive line.
Well, the injuries,
like 8 or 9 guys.
Yeah, they had a lot. Like, if you looked at their offensive line, at one point, I believe every week they had someone who was cut by another team. Like Kai Abashir, I believe it was Kai Abashir, was cut by the Battlehawks, went to San Antonio, got cut from there, and then went to the USFL and then got cut again. So that offensive line, those tackles, collapsing pocket, I think it killed Jack Cohn's mental state, to be honest with you, because he looked so frazzled at times and it ultimately got Sinnett hurt. Like he got injured looking the most efficient, and I think his interception was on the play he got injured.
Right. And so like the Brahmas, that was a tough spot for him to succeed. I think he has a chance in Houston. I put him in as a starter, but it's going to be a competitive USFL conference there. And so if for whatever reason the Roughnecks are not matching up, I wouldn't put it beyond them to potentially go to Jared. But first things first, let's see how they open up the season and how things go.
Yeah, and then you got Nolan Henderson there as well. A lot of people high up on him. I mean, I watched him play at Delaware a little bit. I mean, look good, I guess. I don't know. People look at the stats and they get all jazzed up. I mean, undersized too, man. Like just nothing. But I like their receiving core. I like the fact that they got 5 tight ends on the roster right now, which to me tells me we're going to see a lot of 13
Cool.
personnel, 12 personnel. That defensive line that defense. Houston has had a good defense, no matter what iteration you call them over the last 2 years, or 3 years, they've had a good defense, whether they're the Gamblers or the Roughnecks or this or that. I mean, we talked about it in nauseum, Mike, and anytime we bring it up and people are like, who's going to be the best team? Who got better? I'm like, well, they all got better. You took half the talent, and then you got people. And this is, something that a lot of people forget. From week 7 to 10, some of these XFL guys that were getting signed were not XFL, UFL, USFL caliber players. Like they were signing some guys off the street because anyone who was going to bet on
Sure.
themselves was like, am I going to make $20,000 in the XFL for 3 weeks, or am I going to go to the USFL and bet on myself and get an opportunity to play at least 7, 8,
Play a
9
full season.
weeks? Yeah, like there were some guys that were like,
it was one of the more. I think Yeah, it's so crazy. It's how fluid they are. Like last year, look at it, right? There was like 2 guys who were like huge factors for championship teams. We know about Luis Perez, right? We know how that all worked out. Changing teams. That was a late season kind of move, right? Davion Davis, right? Didn't link on with the Houston Roughnecks. You can get on that organization for the different. It's a different group now, but you can get on them for not banking on his ability, not giving him a chance. They lost Kirkland, which was huge for them. Davis gets let go by the Roughnecks, ends up with the Stallions, and arguably was their best receiver last year, and was one of the big reasons that Alex Magoo had such a great year. And obviously Davis and Watkins are in the NFL, like two of the better receivers that played in spring pro football last year. So you can see a lot of these guys who and it was good for Davis. He got paid for a little bit for the Roughnecks, and then he went ahead and played in the USFL. Yeah, but there was that choice, as you say, where guys were like, you know what, let me get a little bit more money and all that. Some guys ended up double dipping, ended up playing both leagues. It was kind of a bit funny.
Yeah, I mean, and then Davis had obviously.
And as far as the rosters,
yeah,
in the NFL, and he's still in there now. And here's the thing: as far as the rosters go, I see all these teams have gotten better. The problem is somebody's got to lose these games. So someone in this group, injuries could dictate that, right? You could lose a lot of key guys or what have you, and that's part of football, injuries. But somebody's got to go 4-6, 3-7. It'd be like if you took the 8 best teams out of the NFL and put them in one league. I don't care who they are. Just take the playoff teams. Somebody's got to lose games. It's just the way it goes. So anyhow, but so maybe the Roughnecks end up having a season where it's not that great on paper, but they could be much better than the Gamblers, Gamble Necks, however it is. Much better than they were last year.
Yeah, no. And Mike, I know we're creeping up on an hour. I don't want to take too much of your time. But biggest thing for me is not biggest thing, there's a lot of big things for me, but what are you seeing the improved social media presence as well? Do you think they're finally getting it a little bit?
Baby steps, like with a lot of these things. I think sometimes, and look, I can't knock people. I really suck at social media. So anybody who follows me out there, I appreciate it. I don't post every 5 seconds of every little thing. And so that's kind of the story. Sometimes I get this sense that it's the bare minimum. It's just a retweet. I tend to believe in quality over quantity. So that's part of my strategy, but I'm also not a big, a lot of times I don't hit send. So I just as a writer who gets writer's block and often will delete entire paragraphs, I have a tough time with just putting out my thoughts and having knee-jerk reactions out there. I think there are simple things you can do on social media. You just putting out content is important. Content, player content, coach comments. That's what people want to hear during the season. Injury reports, practice reports. Just consistently do those things, and you don't have to get cute or fancy or funny or have cool memes or GIFs or what have you. You just have to constantly put out content and, hype up your players, hype up your coaches. You don't have to necessarily be funny and put SpongeBob stuff out there or whatever the hell. So that's kind of my feeling. There's so many good teams in this league. I saw one of the comments there about Memphis, and that looks like a super team, an all USFL team to me. I wrote about them a little bit in my 4-part series of Sports Illustrated about how I see Memphis as a big threat to Birmingham, and a lot of people do. A lot of people look at that roster. The difference maker there is the quarterback Cooks. They have people forget, like, the Stars were beating the Stallions in that first championship game until Cooks got hurt, and then things kind of changed. So I think Memphis is going to be fun to watch. Have a chance to be really good. The Memphis Breakers. So anyhow, but it's the social media teams. All these new. I know a lot of the people personally interact with the people who are running these social media, running social media for each individual team. I'm rooting for them. Those guys work hard. I think the league itself overall can do a much better job of just hyping up their league, hyping up their players, hyping up their coaches, and just being transparent, giving information. Every transaction, they should be the go-to spot for any transaction that's out there. And the individual teams need to harp on that, not just wait for UFL PR to do their little, we don't have any transactions today, or do their little 2 or 3 names that have signed letters of intent. I think there needs to be more than that.
Well, Coach Beck has done a really good job of, like, some of the stuff too. I'll be honest. Like, he's made some, like, graphics and whatnot, and it's kind of kicked its way down to the main pages and whatnot. But it is what it. Yeah.
So what's cool about that, Pat, is interacting with fans pays off, Pat. Whenever you interact with fans and you even if the league responds to you, that's like a big deal for fans. If the league gives you a big up, or reposts you, or whatever. And Anthony Beck does a great job of communicating and playing along and interacting. So I mean, that's important. I think we saw Reggie Barlow doing the beer snake with all the fans that came out there. That stuff is cool. Like, it doesn't take much to do that, and I think it'll show other people that this is a cool league to want to follow and be a part of, because they make you feel a part of it. So I think that's important along this journey.
Yeah, and I for sure I definitely think anything like Beck is doing and whatnot, like, it's definitely, I think he's one of the good guys in this. Obviously, Reggie Barlow makes his waves. Occasionally, you get a good son of bum tweet here and there. Wade Phillips doing his thing and whatnot. But, I mean, kind of the last thing you want to talk about is, what are you thinking about any of these coaching staffs and whatnot? Is anyone striking your fancy or anything? I'm actually going to pull it up real quick, and then we'll get out of here and whatnot. But what do you
Sure.
what's your take on coaching staff, and then we'll get out of here? Because that's kind of what I want.
It's a lot of tweaking. Yeah, right. That was one of the main topics. I think the big thing that stands out to me is continuity. Like, a lot of the teams that you expect to be good have continuity, and that they're bringing back the same offensive and defensive systems. You mentioned the Battlehawks a little bit of tweaks here. I think that what's interesting to me is how special teams, like, I wrote an article about the Defenders. They're going without a special teams coordinator, which I think is fascinating. I saw this covering the New Jersey Generals in the USFL, where you had a special teams coordinator by committee, where one coach takes the return unit, one coach does the blocking, etc. And so DC right now has guys like Sean Anderson, who I wrote about having a special teams background. Even though he's listed, that's the thing on these teams. Even though they have a title next to them, don't assume that they're coaching just one position. These staffs are so much smaller that guys are wearing multiple hats. So, like, you see a Sean Anderson as a wide receiver coach, he'll be dipping in that. They don't have a tight ends technically coach listed, but guys are going to be going back and forth, and you have to wear multiple hats. These are limited staffs that are going to be working together in unison to try to get the job done. There's a lot of good assistant coaches that were left on the outside looking in, unfortunately, because of all the, the condensing of 16 teams to 8. So I think of guys like Ty Knott, who coached with the Seattle Sea Dragons. He had the best special teams unit. He also coached the wide receivers for Seattle last year, and he's dating back to the AAF with Memphis when he had the best special teams unit there. So when I see teams without special teams coordinators or special teams by committee, I'm like, okay, hopefully this works out. Jamie Sharper's not going to be with the Defenders this year, so they're doing a committee thing there. You look at Bob Stoops' staff, a big news there. No more, who knows what happened behind the scenes there, but no more Jonathan Hayes. His brother's still on the staff, so
Yeah.
not surprised with Chuck Long. The O-line coach I have a high regard for. He's one of the best. Bill Sheridan's very good coach. Scott Spurrier, very good special teams coach. He works in unison with Jonathan Hembaugh. So basically,
Yeah.
you got a lot of continuity. There haven't been a lot of changes. I know the Battlehawks have some tweaks there. No more Ricky Prohl.
Yeah.
You go throughout the league, you're looking at the Stallions staff. There's a lot to like here. They got Chris Boniol there at special teams. Corey Chamblin's back. Bill Johnson comes over from the Roughnecks.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of these.
Aliamo.
Yeah. A lot of these.
Yeah.
Guys,
So they're good. They're good names.
Yeah. A lot of these guys coming back.
Yeah. It's
reconfiguring. Martin Bayless is a guy that's been in these leagues forever. He was on the Stars. He comes back. This is the one I like a lot, man.
Happy
Gino. Well, he's a D2, D3 coach, NFL veteran, coaching with his brother. I'm gonna go out and say it. There were some issues in that offensive line room last year. You might get in trouble for that, but
unfortunately,
it wasn't from it wasn't from the players. So take that for what it's worth. You get someone who's in step. If you're in step with this guy, you're in step with this guy, because that's a very key cog, and it still keeps the St. Louis ties and whatnot. So I mean, I'm pretty okay with this. Leroy Glover and Chris Claiborne, to me, they got some work to do in a good way.
Yeah.
Like, they got some dudes that are gonna eat. Very curious to see what life with Kyle Kasky is like, because I think sometimes
you and I have. I'm sorry. Yeah, Kyle Kasky is going to be interesting, that transition. I'm sorry to interrupt you there, Pat.
No, I mean, it's life is easy when you have Shep back there, but I mean, I think Torrey Woodbury kind of got a little bit more credit than he deserved a little bit, and that might be why he doesn't have a job anymore after some of the shenanigans.
I know there's people in the coaching community I interact with, and you do as well, with Anthony Beck. We have high opinions of him, right? And so, but I know there's people within the coaching community that look at someone like Anthony Beck who, doesn't have a ton of experience in the field, and they question his judgment. But when I see the choices he makes on his staff, I got to say he's doing a very good job. That's not just because I like him.
Yeah. No, he hasn't made a bad selection. Like, last year, something that doesn't get talked about enough is his running backs coach was Art Valero, who I think is still at Texas Tech, spring league, spring football guy, older guy, right? So you got Art. Right. Pat Pearl's really, resume-wise, had a good resume. It just didn't work out. Torrey Woodbury's a guy he's known since his time with the Jets, won a Super Bowl with the Rams. Torrey acted a little bit off kilter. Guess what? He's gone. So Bruce Gradkowski was working at Toledo, was coaching high school football, NFL quarterback. Donnie Abraham from the AAF, from IMG Academy, played with Beck. Donnie brings in his son, right? Okay, the son thing with the son might not work out, and I don't know. But now you bring in Martin Bayless, like Ricky Prohl, not a bad. Phil McKay, was at Colorado in the NFL for years, played in the NFL. Like, Leroy Glover. They bring in Dave Steckel, someone with Missouri ties from the university, linebackers coach, in addition to being the head coach at Missouri State. He resigns. You bring in Chris Claiborne as your number 2. Like, every decision he's made at the time has been the right decision. And then he's had enough wherewithal to, like, okay, this doesn't work out or this doesn't work out. Like, this is the next step. Like that's my opinion on it. Maybe I'm coming off a little.
No, Anthony. No. Anthony Beck is if you interact with him and if you pay attention to the inner workings of the team, he's a very good leader, tough, smart. So he knows what he's doing. That doesn't mean that it's gonna listen. If you look at all the teams in the UFL, like, the Battlehawks have a lot of pressure on them. It's like they need to win the whole thing, basically. Obviously make the playoffs, but especially if they end up having a home game. If the championship's in St. Louis, there's gonna be a lot of pressure on the Battlehawks to make it to that game, and probably people in the league office are gonna be rooting for that, because they can fill it, the stadium, if they're playing the championship. So there's a lot of pressure on Beck and that group. You can't go in St. Louis. That the fan base, they love the team, no doubt. You can't go like 3-7, 4-6. There's a
Well,
lot of pressure to succeed there.
You can go 4-6. You just got to make the playoffs and win out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point, Brad. I forgot about that. We had 3 of those teams. Yeah, we had 3 of those teams in spring football last year. Made the playoffs. That's right.
If we make the playoffs at 4-6, I'm not on this team.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
If the team makes the playoffs at 4-6, like, and we win a championship, I don't care. I don't care at all. But throwing through
go with it. Just get in the tournament.
Right. Dennis Polian maybe sticking around a little bit. I have my opinions on that. Maybe stomping the feet a little bit. He gets to hang out and do that. Doug Martin, Carnell Lake, big guy. Paul, obviously the big man over here.
I like their coordinators.
Yeah.
I like their coordinators. I see upward movement. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Carnell Lake, and I think those guys have upward movement capabilities into the NFL. If they, it depends. You got to produce, right? But I think Doug Martin and Carnell Lake have a chance to be on NFL staffs and make a name for themselves in this league. So it's not just the players. I'm a fan of Lake. Paul Pasqualoni's been around the block. There's a lot of experience on this staff too to go along with those, like, has younger names that we know that's more like modernish in terms of former players, right? So it's a good staff. DiFilippo, they've done a good job there. I trust that the Memphis is going to be really good. So we'll see.
And I think Doug Martin was what's the school called? New Mexico State for a while. New Mexico State and Kent State.
Right. You're right.
Yeah,
coaching.
he was. Right. He was Julian Edelman and Josh Cribbs. He was their quarterback coach / head coach. I'm pretty sure when he was there. So, guy knows some people.
So it's good to have him at receivers, right? Yeah, it's good to have him coaching up the receivers and coordinating if he has that kind of experience, right? That's awesome.
Yeah. So I mean, you got Flip there. Flip's going to be doing the quarterbacking and whatnot. Fun fact: Flip was Jamarcus Russell's coach at one point in reality. But I mean,
that didn't work out for that instance.
Yeah, but I'm pumped that Flip is in this league. Who I'd like to see get a nod at head coach one day would be in one of these leagues is Josh McCown.
Ooh. And it'd be the perfect league. It'd be the perfect league for him, and you get a lot of attention. It has it connects. It checks off the box in several different levels. So that's cool.
It'd be a good rebound for him.
Right.
But San Antonio, they kept the same graphic essentially from last year and just put a yellow thing on top. Son of Bum coming up on 100 career wins. Bridge at the GM now. They're GMs now. They're not DPPs.
Right. I like that. I prefer that term better.
Yeah.
I had one GM. I talked to one GM in the league and said that they liked having that title, but they felt like that now they were more of a boss. Like it was more intimidating that I'm the general manager. So we were kind of joking about that, but I prefer it over director of player personnel for sure. It's good to see Bridge back in the league.
Yeah. I mean, AJ Smith, wonder kid right there. Andre Gerard, Payne Party, Marvin Williams all returning. What do you know about Will Reed a little bit? I know he replaces Brian Stewart.
Yeah, I don't know too much of the background here, and on Will Reed, I got to be honest, because the thing is, like with that defense, and I don't mean this to be disrespectful and win. I know Wade Phillips is looking to do maybe a little bit less, but it's his defense, right? So the person he chose for that job has to be in lockstep with him. And Will Reed's background suggests that that has that he's operating in the same system. It's tough to get someone to take that job. Awesome that Stewart ended up in Tennessee. It seemed like there were a couple of different league guys that ended up on that staff with Derek Mason. It's a little bit tough to get someone to take that job that's a veteran because that's Wade's defense. So it's like ultimately we'll see how he handles it, how much autonomy he has with all that. I think the big thing, with Bridge though, and getting the roster, it helps being with the same coach again, know what players they want for their defense. Kind of a unique setup there. Brahmas did a very good job too. I think a little low key in dispersal. It was kind of a strange setup that they had to go through, trying to figure out how to get watching people take their roughneck players. But they're second in the league with 25 players on their roster that have been on NFL rosters in 2023. Of course, the Stallions, I believe, 35, I believe it is, players that were on NFL rosters in 2023. So the Stallions have that kind of unique stat there. They have a good roster to put together, and the coaching staff's very similar to what they had going on with Roughnecks last year. Same offensive. That's what I look at as the schemes: offensive scheme, defensive scheme. That's kind of what I take a deep look at.
This man right here, C.J. Johnson, coming in. A lot of similarities, getting rid of their special teams coordinator, Ray Bertreski, giving it a single position to Garrett Chakare. What you thinking about
Right.
any of
and
that?
And Ray's well respected. Yeah,
Yeah.
Ray's respected. So I'm disappointed that Ray's not part of the league. Bertreski. We'll see. A lot of it's CJ's call, right? With these staffs, I know the thing is with like CJ Johnson, a lot of these coaches, oh my goodness, did their phones burn up? There are so many coaches that unfortunately were left by the wayside that were calling these guys and saying, "Hey, CJ, can I get on your staff? Can I get on your staff? Can I get on your staff?" I think I mentioned it earlier in this. I trust CJ with receivers. Obviously, they don't have a receivers coach listed. That's his wheelhouse. He's plenty of experience there. And Eric Price is offensive coordinator. Chris Wilson is the DC. These guys, you can see it, the multiple hats the guys are wearing on this staff. So it's interesting. Brett Maxey, someone who stands out. I remember him as a player with the Saints. He's been making his way up the coaching ranks there. So it's a important year. If you're not, I'm very curious how the USFL teams, a lot of these teams stack up to like the Stallions. Can the Roughnecks rise up and take out the Stallions? It's like somebody in that conference is going to step up and pose a huge threat to Birmingham because they're the odds-on favorite. But so I can't wait to see how CJ matches up with Birmingham and the rest of the teams in that conference.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely someone's got to step up and do something, right? Like not to get make it a joke, but do something. And that's kind of the Breakers were kind of the younger brother and whatnot. They pretty much transitioned over to the Showboats. So I don't know. We'll see what happens on that. Final roster on this case. I don't think they spelled Steve Kaiser's name right, by the way. I think the A is there. And
They messed much that, but it's all right.
Colin Bauer, second-year coach. He replaces Stephen Brown, I believe.
Right.
Defensive line.
Shout out to Eric Marty. Gonna miss Eric Marty. So shout out to him. It is what it is, And if the changes here, I'm familiar with Marcel. From his CFL days. Obviously, what he was doing with the Stars under Andrus, they have ties there. Nolan must have liked that off. But it's too bad they don't have Cookies there. But I think EJ Perry has a lot of upside. So we'll see how that all goes there. It's a good staff. Brock Marion's an interesting. I think I have like a sentimental side to me towards the Michigan Panthers because to me I see them as like the OG Panthers, kind of like how I see the San Antonio. Like I don't see the Carolina Panthers as my Panthers. I grew up with the Michigan Panthers as my pro football team that was called the Panthers, and so I have a sentimental side to me that's rooting for Mike Nolan and this group. It's kind of a unique one. So we'll see how it goes with the Panthers here. That's a big change at offensive coordinator. He must have really liked what the Stars were doing there, be impressed with them for Nolan to make that move. He's a defensive guy, obviously. He has coached on the offensive side of the ball, Mike Nolan. I remember he was with the Jets, strangely enough, coaching wide receivers I believe it was under Al Gross. It's pretty good. Tim Holt. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say co-tight.
I remember. Yeah, no, it was but it was funny with Nolan. Nolan was in the midst of his defensive coaching career as a defensive coordinator, and the Jets had hired him, if I'm not mistaken, to coach wide receivers for 1 year. It was wacky. But anyway, it is what it is. I could be mistaken. I'm pretty sure that you'll see that with guys throughout their career where they've switched sides. It's kind of cool. I like that sometimes. But anyhow, it seems like. What's that, Pat? What's that? I'm sorry.
No, I'm saying it's a combination of I don't know, you just kind of put some good people on your staff, in my opinion. It's whether it be like a homie hookup or here's $250,000, just tell them to run straight. I'll help you out. I coach linebackers. How do I coach defensive, or how do I coach offensive linemen? Oh no, you'll figure it out. It'll be all right.
Good blurb there from I just saw it in the chat, the Chris Boniol and Brock Marion teammates of Moose Johnson, which is cool. I'm sure Moose would have loved to have had Mike Riley, very close to ties to Mike Riley in this league. I don't know if Mike's got some issues off the field or what have you, but maybe if this league expands to 10 teams, we'll see. Everybody wants to bring up expansion, but maybe Mike makes his comeback to the league. Expansion. There goes DC.
Yeah, there it is. That's my guy, man.
Yeah, Reggie so Barlow. I mean, I love Reggie Barlow, and he got legitimate interest from not only NFL teams but Power 5 teams were trying to hire him. He doesn't want to. He didn't want to leave the job as head coach. He loves being a head coach at a pro football team. So, unless he's given an opportunity to be a head coach somewhere else or a top prominent coordinator type spot in a very good school, he's going to stay right where he is. Because if people were interested in him, not much change here. We mentioned no special teams coordinator. It's going to be a committee thing where guys chip in. It's a good staff. Fred Keiss was arguably the top assistant in spring pro football last year. Very underrated what he did, the job he did with Jordan Tam with that run game, how they married those concepts together.
Yes.
Greg Williams is fun as hell. It's fun him being in the league. Makes the games interesting. His secondary came apart in the league championship game. I think they made a lot of moves there to improve that. So we'll see how it goes for DC on that front. This is a very solid staff up and down the line. Russ Ehrenfeld's very underrated. Very good offensive line coach. I like the development of some of the younger guys. I'm interested in DeMarcus Hayes this year from Georgia. I think he's very raw. I'm not surprised he didn't get an NFL opportunity, but that could be coming next year if they have a big year. Mike Maietti is a guy who's Pro Football Focuses number one graded center in all of college football, but he's smaller, shorter. He had injuries last year. I think Ehrenfeld's you could see all the videos out there. A lot of coaching people out there were putting out videos of the DC defenders run blocking schemes and offensive line plays last year on social media. And I think a lot of that has to do with how good of a coach Russ Ehrenfeld is. So it's a very good staff. Reggie's got a good group.
Yeah, I mean, Reggie is a good leader of men as well. Like, I personally have a little bit of a personal relationship. My mentor was his coach when he was at Alabama State, and eventually transitioned to replace him when he went to the Raiders and whatnot. Reggie's pretty awesome too, because he was actually Tavares Jackson's head coach. And not only was he Tavares Jackson's head coach, he was also Greg Jenkins' head coach, who Greg also played in the NFL as well. So he's coached 2 NFL quarterbacks coming from a small HBCU where no one really probably cared about that much as well.
Right.
Sean Anderson, another guy, I just want to give him a shout out. St. Louis local, GLVC D2 product, finally making his way to pro football as well. And then, you got Greg Williams as well, having St. Louis ties. So that when they return to the Dome, it could be a little goofy. And then Von Hutchins, obviously, hats off to him, finally getting the general manager title that he deserves. Now he can make
huge fan of these guys. Yeah. Yeah. That's cool.
When you transition from a DPP to GM, it makes a difference. But Mike, I didn't want to take up too much of your time. Went about an hour and a half. I think we had some good discussions, everything like that. As everyone can see, I am doing storage auctions right now as well. So
there you go. Awesome.
So
you've got your hands in so many different things, man. People don't know. Pat's a busy man. Very busy man.
Yeah, I try to be, man. Just trying to get this electric bill paid, man. That's really it. Want to upgrade the internet.
That's the way it goes, right?
Yeah, right. But final thoughts, Mike. First off, thank you everyone who came through and whatnot. You got a question here, so.
Okay, go for it.
Let's do it. Okay, hey Mike, I am a Houston Roughnecks fan, and I am so confused as to why our head coach and GM aren't trying to bring in a more established QB, but instead relying on younger, unproven talent. Why is that? Well, first thing I would like to say is I don't think Reed Sinnett is unproven by any means. If you've looked He's played in like 9 preseason games, 7 touchdowns, been around NFL camps, was in the XFL last year, then went back to the NFL. Not only in the preseason played in games, but also on the NFL roster around Joe Burrow, and I mean all that. That's a lot of experience. He's made like $2 million in the NFL too, so it's like, I mean, you're not going to get like, I don't know what someone. Where's that buffer?
I
You
wouldn't
know?
rule out. I'll say this for
Yeah.
Carlos. I wouldn't rule out, because this is I know it's the Roughnecks, right? But it's really the Gamblers, because it's a returning team. It was kind of interesting that they didn't stick with some of the guys they had last year, or some of the people they saw on the USFL side that maybe they liked. They more went the route of, Reed Sinet, Jared Guarantano. They have faith in those guys, but I wouldn't rule out them adding another quarterback to the mix as we go along. Reed Sinet, to me, is the odds-on favorite. They like Jared Guarantano a lot. There's a reason why they brought him in. They're happy that he signed on to the league to be a part of them. Maybe he proves people wrong. He's another guy who's been on that fringe of the NFL that really hasn't got an opportunity to play that much, although he's played well in the preseason. He's shown some sparks there, some promise. So maybe he gets an opportunity to get more reps. I wouldn't rule out. First off, I think it's possible that some of these backup quarterbacks that we see on rosters, these GMs are going to get phone calls. Like, people are going to call about Cole Kelly. People are going to call about a Lindsey Scott. People are going to be, when they're going to sit through camp, look at practices, go, you know what, we need to get another guy. And so that could very well happen. So I wouldn't rule out, just because of what you see right now, I wouldn't rule out the possibility of new quarterbacks either joining the league or a trade being made here or there, because there's some crowded quarterback rooms over there, and there's some value. Like, I wouldn't trade away Cole Kelly per se if I was the Showboats, but what if they feel like we're lacking in a certain area and they see a player on another team, whatever, a Donald Payne or whatever, somebody they think will be a difference maker on one side of the ball, and they say, all right, let's bite the bullet here and trade away Kelly. So it's not over. But I think maybe you're underselling Reed Sinet a little bit. And I think Jared Guarantano is an interesting prospect. I think he might show you something if he gets an opportunity to get on the field. They didn't show Kenji Bahar or whatever and all that stuff. It's quite telling that they did. I'm sorry. I don't have anything against Kenji. But it's just it's telling that they decided not to go in that direction, not even bring him back. So anyhow.
Yeah, no, I think Kenji Bahar is a guy I like in this sense, not as a quarterback, but he's one of these guys that you're like, okay, I'd love to see him get an opportunity. He got an opportunity. He didn't play well. Okay, on to the next one. Let's get another guy in there. Hopefully he does well. If he doesn't, okay, but Kenji Bahar can't be 85 years old wondering now, did I ever get an opportunity? No, he did, and that's great. And now we move on to the next phase.
And there are young quarterbacks that I'd like to see try league. Like I already mentioned, like a Kellen Mond or one of these guys. But, you're not going to get as far as established quarterbacks go, and I saw the comment in there by Benjamin, you're not just going to get like randomly out of nowhere, get some kind of like veteran guy who's like 12 NFL starts or 16 NFL starts or something. It would be cool, right? It would be cool if all of a sudden PJ Walker showed up in a Roughnecks uniform or something like that. That'd be cool. I'm not voting against it, right?
Yeah. I think we're
but I don't see it happening.
Yeah. I think because people talk about AJ, right? It's like, one, AJ had 4 starts coming into the XFL. 2, he was hurt all of 2022, so he needed that opportunity. All of 2021, and then in the workout cycle for 2022, and didn't get signed that year. So he needed the XFL to come back, and not needed, but it buoyed him from week 15 getting signed as QB3 to, okay, this is a guy we're comfortable putting into the NFL, because he did have workouts in 2022. So this kind of jump-started the conversation with him once more. For PJ Walker to come back, I think 5 years. When he's kind of in that like Josh Rosen signing, like we bring him in, like it's week 15. Kind of like Josh Johnson was, in that like from 2015 to 2018, Johnson was a training camp arm. We sign him for 3 weeks, and then that's where I see PJ. I think it'd be great for the league. Like not today, but like 5 years from now, if they're still around, and you're like, you just say PJ, he's back, and then we'll see what the records are and whatnot. But yeah, I think PJ Walker actually holds the record still in 5 games for touchdowns in Houston Roughnecks history. He had 15.
Pretty crazy how prolific he was.
Yeah,
he was prolific.
5.
Him and Cam Phillips.
Phillips,
who still, by the way, is a free agent. I don't know if any of the he's still Cam Phillips is out there. I'm assuming he's going to end up back with the Argos or another CFL team. He's done a good job in Canada, but he's out there if a UFL team wants to make the phone call and see if he's. I'm not sure he would make the plunge, but Cam Phillips is available if AJ Smith wants to put him on the Brahmas.
I would.
I'm just saying.
It'd be a cool tweet.
I would too.
It'd be good social media. Mike, let's do one more question. Dan Savar, I know we've said one more question twice, but I got to get my Sunday in order. What are your thoughts on the Battlehawks defense as far as they had some holes last year? I mean, pass rush, interior defensive line, I feel like that's been addressed. Need a little bit more athletic at the linebacker. Right. I mean, they upgraded their defense. They scrapped their whole room. I think Brandon Sebastian's the only one that's there again. So I mean, that's
if I was them, yeah, I agree with you. I think the key is those two guys they just picked up, Pita and Austin Falalu. Those two guys are very important for the defense. All XFL defensive players, definitely. Pita is very talented. He's another one of those guys I mentioned earlier in a conversation about Darius Shepard, where I think this guy's an NFL player. It's just a matter he's not just because he's not on an NFL roster. So I think Pita, I think Austin Falalu, those are big pickups. Their back end of their defense. I'm sorry, the back end of their defense, they really need. I love the Trace McSorley idea, by the way, Benjamin. I just saw your comment there. He's one of the names I was thinking of when I was thinking of Kellen Mond, too. I mentioned in this conversation that there are certain quarterbacks that have been in contact with the league, and they've turned it down. So I'll leave it at that for the moment. Unfortunately, these names you're mentioning, the Anthony Brown Jr.'s, all these guys, a lot of these guys have already been reached out to. And then we don't hear it publicized about guys who turned down the league, but or maybe I just let the cat out of the bag on one of those things, but not to say that people can't change their mind, but that's the way it is. As far as the Battlehawks defense goes, I think they're going to be in the market for still looking during camp. We're going to see trades. We've seen trades in these leagues. We're going to see trades during camp. I think the Battlehawks are going to be on the lookout for it. They should be anyway. Linebacker, somebody in the back end. They need a difference maker on that side. I love Drayvon Askew Henry. I've been a big fan of him since he was with the Guardians, with the Generals. I think that was a huge pickup. He's a guy who's I wish he was in the NFL too. He's one of those guys who can play nickel. He can play safety. He can man up as a corner. He can play back end safety. He can be your deep ball center fielder type there. I think he's very talented. Obviously related to Darrell Revis. Beck has connections to the Jets there. I think the Battlehawks need a Dijon Hines. They should be looking at They should be looking at linebackers that are out there or linebackers that are available on other rosters. They need another guy. They need to select. You look at a team like the Stallions. I mean, not that they're competing directly with that linebacking core, but the Stallions linebacking core is ridiculous. That might be the best linebacking core I've seen in spring football ever. With Tizino, Chris Orr, and DeMarquise Gates is probably arguably the best spring ball linebacker since 2019. And then, of course, Scooby's in there too. So, I mean, that's a really talented linebacking core. So the Battlehawks don't quite have that, but they could use one of those types of players on their roster for sure.
Mike, do you remember a player, this will be my final thought, by the name of Michael Boley in 2000? He was on the Giants. Do you remember him when the Giants signed him?
Did he play for the Bengals too? The name's escaping me at the moment, or the Chargers.
He played for the He's a Falcons guy. But the whole reason why I bring up Michael Boley is...
Okay, fair enough.
He might have played on those teams, but I know he played on the Falcons at one point. The whole reason why I bring up Michael Boley is that in 2006, when the Eagles were peak McNabb, peak Brian Westbrook, the Giants had a guy named Antonio Pierce playing their Mike. And I remember watching Antonio Pierce chasing behind Brian Westbrook. They signed in Michael Boley. That's the guy who made the difference. He didn't break 140 tackles a year, but he was able to cover these more athletic players. He was a coverage linebacker.
Yes.
I don't know who that is on this team. Mike Rose, neck like this. Lakeem Williams, thick. Travis Feeney's an edge rusher. Pete is an edge rusher. Carson Wells, very versatile. He might be your closest, best coverage linebacker.
Yeah.
I mean, but who is that guy that's going to go one-on-one
Yeah,
with
Donnie.
Williams?
Yeah, Donnie. That's a good Michael Boley. I remember Michael Boley and Donnie Abraham obviously played with a similar guy in that Derek Brooks, who's like an all-world player, every down guy. You got who's the Quincy Williams on this bat that you need that in today's day and age of modern football. You need that linebacker who never leaves the field, who can cover space, because that's what teams end up doing. Even if you got good cover guys at corner and all that, they exploit you at tight end and running back, all that in the passing game. So you need those studs. And the Battlehawks, I mean, this is no disrespect to the guys that they currently have on the roster, but they don't have that kind of satellite linebacker, that kind of guy who's is all over the place, can cover so much ground. And so they could use that type of player. I would be scouring rosters, and I think there's some players, I will get into it another time, that for whatever reason were ignored during this dispersal draft process that I'm kind of surprised by. There might be character issues. I don't know. Maybe some guys don't want to play in the league. But the Battlehawks need to be on the lookout. I have a feeling, don't be surprised if they work the phones trying to trade for a linebacker or even a back end player, maybe even in the secondary as camp goes along.
Yeah, and you could take a safety and put them in the box at this point, like they're doing. Deion Buchanan has been doing that. There's other guys who've been doing that. You can adjust the scheme, but I mean, yeah, that's, and I've been saying it in nauseum at this point. No one on St. Louis stand like in their well, I'd say back seven, because I consider they got some dudes up front, and I consider Travis Feeney kind of becoming one of your 2 and 3. That's a pretty good depth as far as like, which I look for Feeney to have a better season this year, because of Pete's attention. You see Travis Feeney might get 7 or 8 sacks, a little bit cheap sacks, where you're like, I didn't think he did that well this year. And you're like, well, when you got Peter coming on the side, that's your time to eat type thing, So, but I think Travis a little older, been with Beck from the AAF. They got rid of some of their AAF guys. Their Fleet Connection guys that went to the wayside.
Yes, yeah. Hageman, I think Donnie and a few other guys there. Yes.
Yeah, which those guys were a little older and they were doing other things with their lives too. So I don't think I don't know, if I get an opportunity to ask offline about that, I probably will. But Feeney's still holding strong from the AAF.
He's if I'm not mistaken, former NFL draft pick. I think the Battlehawks have 11 of those guys on their roster. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Feeney was like a 5th or 6th round pick. Maybe I could be mistaken on that, but he was drafted. He was drafted into the NFL. He's lasted. He's a quality player. He's lasted. He can play on specials. He can play in the base defense, obviously. So he's got value. You can move him around the formation and do a lot of different things with him. So yeah, a lot of these we're gonna have roster movement. Next couple of days we'll hear about certain guys who've been released and injured, and et cetera, et cetera. And then as we go along, we're gonna get trades during the season. So if I'm sure that, and these GMs, the thing is, these teams practice with each other, right? So you might be sitting there, like the defenders are practicing, if I'm not mistaken, off the top of my head, because I did an article about this at SI. They're practicing with the Roughnecks. And I believe the Battlehawks are with the Showboats. So I'm sure they're in practice every day. You're going to be looking at Memphis's linebackers going, you might not be able to pry away Avonte Diggs, but you might see a guy or two there who you like jumps out at you that you're like, hey, that could be good.
Yeah.
So, on our unit. So that's going to be interesting dynamic with this. These GMs interact with each other all the time. So there's always the what about him? What about him? So that you'll see it. You're going to see some movement, your roster movement before the season even starts. And there are going to be players who join this league in season. That happened last year too. There'll be those fence guys I'm talking about. You saw in the chat people mentioning the McSorleys and all that. I don't know if one of those guys is going to show up. Some of these guys, they just don't. They don't have a realistic. They're not very realistic on where their career arc is and where they're headed in their career. So maybe some of them don't care. But some of these guys like the Kellen Monds, the Trace McSorleys, they're treading water. If they're fine with being the third or fourth quarterback and never playing and getting on the field leading an offense, that's cool. If they're fine with that, if they don't want to be a leader anymore, they don't want to lead an offense, that's cool. But, some of these guys should take the plunge. I wouldn't say no. Or you could be Josh Rosen, be out of football for 3 years doing nothing. So anyway, it's just the way it goes.
Well, Mike, I appreciate it. I know we both got to get back at it about an hour and 40 minutes into this bad boy.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, no. I think I said around like an hour.
Crazy. It's usually,
right? But
And I
Mike,
know I
thank
have
you.
family in the house, so I'm sure they're like wondering how this all happened. But I
Yeah,
appreciate Pat. I love talking football. You're one of the most
yeah,
knowledgeable guys out here. I
I
love your
appreciate
show.
that.
I think you do such a great job. I like when I get an opportunity. I like just showing up as a fan and being in the comment section and throwing some comments your way. You've done a great job with this. You work so hard at it, and so
Yeah,
the space is better because you're in it, and it's fun to interact. And this is going to be a fun season to cover all this stuff and
yeah,
watch this unfold. I can't wait till the games.
yeah. No, we can't. Friends, family, all that. We can't wait either. We can't wait to get back on the Zoom with the players and the coaches, and just be a part of another year of this. But Mike, thank you so much, guys. If you're new here, find
Thank you,
him.
brother.
Yeah, buy Mike Mitchell on the Twitter. Make sure to like, subscribe, help us grow this channel. We're pretty close to the monetization, all
What
that
number you at
stuff.
with the subscribers? Hey,
I think
hey Pat, where are you at with the subscribers?
972.
Oh, we got to get there. We'll get there.
Not,
Yeah, we'll
yeah,
get there.
pretty,
Hope it
pretty.
grows. What is that? That +4 or +6 or how are we doing this week? Did you add a couple more last couple days? I hope
I think I had a
maybe.
couple more. So I'm not gonna
Okay.
lie. One of them was
All
mine
right.
because I had to make a new email. So
Hey, you got to do what you got to do.
yeah. So I was like,
Good for you.
I had to make a new email for something. So I was like, oh, okay, but hey,
That's cool. Yeah, well, you're putting out tremendous content, Pat. I appreciate you doing great thing for players, coaches, the stats. I love how you keep up with things, career earnings, the quarterback stuff, all this stuff that everybody else is catching on later. You've been doing that stuff for a while, so appreciate you, bro. Thank you for having me on.
Appreciate you, man. No problem, man. Thank you so much. And guys, that's it. Thank you guys so much for coming in. Appreciate Mike's, running around with the family today. Appreciate you guys. If you guys can drop a like, subscribe, share, it really helps me out. But thank you guys. Appreciate it.